revising?
Sure, yeah. Usually it feels very sort of like hard to describe, right? I'm sure you know, like it just feels very intuitive. Like I just kind of have to go, sort of, I'm like writing along towards the scene. I can usually feel when something feels wrong. Like when something feels boring, that's when I definitely know I've gone on the wrong track and I have to go back a chapter and like do something more interesting here. I'm trying to think of an example. Like in this book, the scene, I'm trying to make sure it was this book and not book 12. Yeah, the scene where Blue, is it this book? Hang on a second. This is my brain. Where,
It's a lot of dragons to keep track of.
yeah.
I can keep track of them all.
Is there a scene with a water tower in this book?
No.
Well, then never mind.
So anyway.
Spoiler.
Yeah, seriously. Oh my gosh, that was close. So when I will realize that something doesn't feel right, and then I will go and sort of rewrite that chapter. I usually don't get like much further than a couple of chapters before I start going back and fixing. So by the time I've got a first draft, it usually feels like all of the plot points are fine, or like are what I want them to be, because of the revising as I go. And then often times the thing I go back and add in the like last revisions is scene setting, because I love writing dialogue. In case you can't tell, it's like my favorite thing. So I could write pages and pages of dialogue and like feelings, but then what's actually around them is the part that I have to stop and think about in order to write. And so sometimes when I'm trying to get a first draft written, that's the thing I'll leave out until I go back, because I can always like add a paragraph describing the palace and make it more interesting. So yeah, so that's kind of the order of things. Like she has liked most of the first drafts. There's been a couple of books where she changed where she asked for a few sort of changes, but for the most part, when she sends it back to me, it's down to like line editing. So I don't usually know them ahead of time, and what's really funny is that I have like an inner resistance to long chapters. And chapters that end like with everyone just going to sleep. You know, I really want the chapter to be like as dramatic as possible. But so what will often happen is as I'm writing along, if I start feeling like the chapter is too long, if it gets to be like 9 or 10 pages, I'm like, okay, something terrible has to happen so I can end this chapter in order to get us to another chapter. So that I don't always actually do it, but that's often my thought process. Chapter endings are something that I do go back and look at. I don't often, I guess there have been a couple of times where I've like added chapter endings in chapters that felt too long. But I always just try to make them, even if they're not cliffhangers, like at least as interesting as possible. So I'll rewrite those sentences a few times. Yeah, usually about halfway through that I start thinking of what the outline for the rest of the book will be. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily chapter by chapter, but like, okay, here are the really specific things we need to get through to get to the end. Good question. Okay, so the deadlines have gotten sort of more crunched since we started, although they gave me extra time for book 11, which was really nice, because there's a lot more world building to sort of start over again in book 11. I had to come up with the new tribes and the new history. So I had like 9 months for this one instead of 6. So I think I did manage to finish the first draft of this book right before Thanksgiving last year, and then it came out in June. So I have, and then book 12, I turned in June, and that's coming out in December. So yeah, it was really like
fast.
Yes, and so they would really like to have book 13 like by Thanksgiving or Christmas at the latest. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but I'm working on it.
For being here today.